So, it's been a while, twice in fact, and I'm sorry. The first time I had no reasons, I just took 6 months to make a video which ended up not being that great anyway, but this time it was quite different. In the past few months I've had to take some of the most important exams in my life, and along with that came a lot of stress and anxiety, which often came from the fear of failing these exams. And so, throughout this period I often found myself going back to doing what I like, playing video games, and within that, finding not only relief and comfort, but also a sense of satisfaction and achievement. And one of the main games I played during this time was a simple yet surprisingly thoroughly enjoyable game called Wilmot's Warehouse. It's an organising sim where you play as Wilmot, an amorphous blob who spends most of the game organising parcels in his warehouse. It's simple, and for some, it sounds rather boring. Yet due to how the developers execute this premise, they create a relaxing yet satisfying atmosphere which permeates throughout the game, while also most importantly helping to make the game such a fun and pleasant experience. Firstly, before we get to how the game creates satisfaction, let's talk instead about how the game creates a sense of relaxation within the player, and how it contributes to why the game was so enjoyable. When you open this game, you will always be met with the game's UI and visual design, both of which in this case utilise simplicity to create a relaxing atmosphere. For instance, we can look to the game's colour scheme for a great example of this. Most of the game uses a monochrome colour palette, only using colours for the parcels to make each of them distinct from each other and to ensure that they pop from the background. This means that the game's visuals often remain well below the cognitive load, so that the game doesn't overwhelm you visually and instead gives you little to process, meaning that the player is allowed to focus on the fun part of the game, the gameplay, as their focus isn't being devoted to other places, while they are also allowed to relax as they feel safe in the knowledge that they understand what is going on. This effect is then compounded by the soundtrack, which accompanies the game. In our past videos we've talked a lot about the importance of sound to create immersion, and Wilmot's Warehouse is no different. Its soundtrack, composed by Eli Rainsbury, helps to envelop the player within the game's atmosphere by creating smooth, comforting sounds which are easy to listen to. They aren't jagged sounds which accentuate a game's thrilling action, like McGordon's Doom and Wolfenstein soundtracks, but they instead fit with the game's general atmosphere, ensuring that the game feels consistent in its tone, while it, along with the UI and visuals, help to create a zen-like atmosphere, which in my experience was crucial as it creates a simplicity which ensures that the game felt easy to approach, while it also crafts a unique identity for the game, which makes an otherwise satisfying but rather dull premise, stacking boxes, feel almost fantastical and a pleasant escape from reality. Yet while this zen-like atmosphere does ensure that the game is easy to approach, the player still needs to be engaged so that the game is enjoyable, and that's where the other side of the coin comes in, the satisfaction that the game creates. Wilmot's Warehouse's premise is a main contributor to this, as the idea of organisation is appealing to many, due to the satisfaction that comes from creating order from chaos. But in this case it's what designers Richard Hogg and Ricky Haggett place around the game's premise, which ensures that the game remains satisfying and fun. This means that firstly, for those that are excited by the idea of organisation, the magic doesn't wear off after a few hours, and those that aren't as attracted to the concept can also find the game just as satisfying and therefore enjoyable. These mechanics can be summed up in two big ideas, memory and time, and surrounding this there is also a positive feedback loop. Let's look at memory first, and here the developers test it by limiting the player's vision. In most top-down games you are able to see everything that's going on around the character you are controlling, but games like for instance Project Zomboid limit the player's view to increase the tension, as you never know what's behind your back. In Wilmot's Warehouse a similar mechanic is used. Here the developers have made it so you can't see all the boxes on the screen, which then incentivizes the player to be organised, as the player is rewarded depending on how much they can remember with the use of time. Here the developers give the player skill points depending on the amount of time they take to deliver all the packages needed, and this then creates a positive feedback loop, as the better you get at organising parcels, the better upgrades you get, which creates a sense of achievement within the player as there is feasible progression shown within the game. All three of these mechanics ensure that the game is satisfying beyond its initial premise, with the utilisation of time and memory in Wilmot's Warehouse providing a challenge which is satisfying for the player to overcome, while the positive feedback loop makes the player feel rewarded for doing the right things. While this blend of satisfaction and relaxation isn't astoundingly unique, as it's in many games. For instance, the likes of Stardew Valley and Minecraft both use it to some extent, but in Wilmot's warehouse it isn't blurred out by surrounding mechanics and is instead the main focus of the game, making it a great showcase as to how fun a game can be made by simply trying to induce these two feelings within the player, as it makes the game not only extremely fun, but also very easy to access. And it's this satisfying zen that is created by the designers of Wilmot's warehouse, which ensures that it is a deeply enjoyable game, which, throughout that tough period I went through, enabled me to feel better, as it didn't just relax my nerves and help me avoid stress, but it also instilled a sense of achievement and satisfaction within me, which in the end helped me to feel great.